Welcome to Becoming Virtuosa, the podcast with Dr. Susan Crockett. You are listening to episode number 32, 5 Steps to Stop Binging. This is an interview with fellow certified life coach and certified eating disorder coach, Lisa Becker. This episode is dedicated to all our friends, patients, and clients struggling with binging.
Welcome to Becoming Virtuosa, where women learn to love their lives. Do you find yourself frustrated by society's expectations? Looking for practical advice on how to discover your talents and level up your life? You found the right place. Here's your host, U.S. News top doctor, robotic surgeon, and certified life coach, Dr. Susan Crockett.
Hello, my virtuosas. How are you today? I hope you're having as lovely a day as I am. It is beautiful outside. I'm your host, Dr. Susan Crockett, and you can call me Sue, as always, because I'm not being your doctor. Why do I keep saying that? I'm not doctoring today. We're teaching, and we're having a wonderful, really important, lively discussion with one of my favorite coaches, Lisa Becker. And before we get into that, I just wanted to tell y'all a little story about something that happened to me this week. I'm going through like this transition period. Every once in a while, we end up in these big transitions in our lives. And I happened to be going through it. It was kind of started back in January. I led y'all through like becoming a podcaster from not being a podcaster. Well, now I'm going from being somebody who really didn't take care of themselves very well to really paying attention to my body and what it's telling me and how I take care of it and how it moves, and just having gratitude for the health that I have now and wanting to move into a place where actually I have those habits that healthy people have. As doctors, we're really terrible because a lot of times we just take care of everybody else and we live crazy lives. Sometimes we're very busy, get up early, take call, and we find ourselves just eating here and there and just being careless with ourselves. And so I just want to encourage any of you that may be in that same path that, you know what, it's never too late to make a decision to change. And I was inspired this week by somebody that I met who's already an example of what's possible for me. And I thought, yep, that's where I need to go next. So I want to encourage you guys, if you are on the threshold of making a decision about making transitions or transformations in your life for the good, I want you to join me. Join me on the next 8 weeks as we go through setting up some new healthy habits. All right, so on today's show, we are talking with Lisa Becker. She is, in addition to being one of our Virtuosa coaching coaches, she is a certified eating disorder recovery coach. And she has a passion for helping women and teens heal their destructive relationship with food. Now, I mentioned in the last podcast, when you're listening to this podcast, I know not all of you have binging eating disorders or eating disorders, but a lot of you do. A lot of you suffer from being overweight and out of control. And some of you suffer with binging from relation to other things such as alcohol or bad habits like TV or checking out on life. So I want you to listen to this carefully with an ear to wherever it may apply in your life. Maybe it doesn't apply to you at all. Maybe this isn't a problem that you have, but I would bet you that there is a family or friend who does, and maybe this will help give you some insight and compassion into their world. So Lisa works with those who are either diagnosed with an eating disorder or who suffer from disordered eating thoughts and behaviors that are taking over their life. Lots of our clients are stuck in the diet binge cycle, and they're constantly thinking about food, feeling out of control around food. They've lost touch with their hunger and fullness signals, and they eat emotionally. And then they feel guilty, ashamed, exhausted. They want a long-term, sustainable solution to finally end this struggle for the last time so that they can fully enjoy life. So today, Lisa is going to share 5 steps to starting to get a handle on this. This is part of what she teaches at the beginning of her program. So without further ado, here's Lisa. Hey, Lisa, how are you doing today?
Hi, Sue. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so glad to be able to talk with you today. I introed this a little bit on the last podcast. I kind of let our listeners know that we were going to be talking about binging and how to overcome that. And I talked with them about it in terms of, I think we almost always attach that to eating disorders. But I think there's probably some value in thinking about it in terms of binging other things like alcohol or Netflix or stuff like that. So I hope that our listeners are going to take something away from this, and I'm real excited to chat with you about it today. Such an expert in this. So how about if you start by telling us how you came to coaching, and particularly to this as a thing that you help people with? This is an amazing topic.
Yeah, so thanks. So I struggled with anorexia when I was a teenager for about
Wow.
8 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really painful, but I recovered a long time ago. But I would say throughout all of my years, I'm now in my 50s, throughout all of my years, I still was stuck in that diet mentality mindset, which most people, most women, especially in our culture, are,
Right.
where yeah, it's, thin is good, fat is bad. What's the latest diet? Use willpower, restrict, be as good as possible. You shouldn't eat this, you should eat that. All of those rules. And when I
Yep.
turned 50, I came to I had some life-changing thoughts and just decided I can't stand this anymore. I have to break out of this, right? So what I did was I started doing some research online, and I started listening to some podcasts actually. And I found intuitive eating, and that was the first part of my journey.
You know what? That's so funny that you should mention it. I had never heard of this before. Last evening, I had a face group Zoom talk with my coaching group that we certified with. They were talking about this. I'm like, what the heck is this? So, oh my gosh. Okay, go on.
Yeah. So I started with intuitive eating. And intuitive eating, the idea is it's not a diet, but it is about really getting in touch with your body's signals, your mind signals, and using your body's wisdom to notice hunger, to notice fullness. But it's not a diet where you only eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full. It's also to weave in nutritional information and practical information. So
important.
it's really great. And then after that, I heard about Carolyn Costin, who I am actually a certified eating disorder recovery coach, as well as a certified life coach from the Life Coach
So
School.
cool.
But yeah, so I heard about Carolyn Costin, and she wrote a bunch of books. She opened the first eating disorder recovery treatment residential center in California like many years ago, and she's well known in the field. And she sold Montanito, which was her residential organization, and she started a training company. And I was like, wow, this is perfect. I would love to be able to give back and to be part of the movement where I help women overcome their issues with food, their issues with their body.
So deep. It's so pervasive. Oh my gosh.
It's everywhere. It really is. And then I actually think that I found Brooke's podcast about the same time. And I started listening, and I signed up with a coach for a 6-week program, and it was amazing. And then I heard about self-coaching scholars, and then I decided to become a life coach. And so
just kind of snowballed.
It snowballed. And I was like, this is it. I have to be part of this community. So I first signed up for the eating disorder coaching training.
Cool.
And then about 6 months later, I was in self-coaching scholars, signed up for the certification with Brooke at the Life Coach School.
Right.
And so I graduated both of those, got certified in March, April 2019. And what I do is I combine the tools from both.
That's really unique.
Yeah. My main philosophy is based on what I know you've taught a lot, Sue, about the model, the thought model, the CTFAR.
Right.
So I use that with all my clients, but I also weave in some very specific eating disorder recovery tactics and strategies that are similar but different.
So you're going to share some of those secrets with us today?
Yes, I am.
Awesome.
Yes, I am. So I work with women who are both struggle with actual eating disorders, most of them binge eating disorder, but I also work with a lot of women who are struggling with just overeating, and they're similar but different.
Why don't you start by telling us how those are different?
Yeah. So overeating is eating more than your body needs to fuel itself. And many of us will overeat at dinner, and we just don't really think anything about it. I mean, some of us do, and we dwell on it a little, and we're like, oh, okay, I'll just be, I'll be better the next day. Someone with binge eating disorder, it becomes obsessive, and they go beyond a point where they are really harming their body. It's not just overeating here and there. They're obsessing. They feel so much shame. Sometimes they even black out, and it's just this compulsive behavior where they just don't even know what's going on, and it just becomes habitual, and they just can't stop it. And it's just this diet, restrict, then binging cycle that just goes on. So basically they diet or restrict. So they minimize what they're eating. They tell themselves, you know what, I can't have it. I can't have it. They're using willpower, and they, over time, they just can't stand it anymore. They have such a strong urge, and they binge. Or this could be also, like you said earlier, with anything really, with trying to avoid alcohol or other buffers. I just happen to specifically work with binge eaters or overeaters.
Cool.
Yeah. And then after they binge or overeat, really, they feel a lot of shame. They feel a lot of guilt. And then they tell themselves, I'm going to be good tomorrow. I'm going to be good tomorrow. And sometimes when they say that, though, they're like, so I might as well keep eating. I might as well just keep going and eat the house down. And they feel absolutely awful. You wake up the next morning and it's like you have a hangover from food.
Wow.
So, and you just feel so much, but I'm going to be good today. And the cycle starts over.
Wow. So you've got 5 specific steps to help people stop binging if they want help stop binging.
Yeah.
How about if you tell us a little bit about those steps? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a top line of each. So step 1 is really to cultivate awareness. Most of us who do this, we just go through our days and we're not even paying attention to it. So it's really to slow down and to pay attention and become that watcher of our thoughts, which I believe you've talked about a little on the podcast, and to start with after the fact and go, and think about, okay, what happened yesterday? And start to break that down. What was I thinking? What was I feeling? What was going on? Was there a trigger? And start to uncover what was going on. That's the first step.
Yeah, that's a hard one because I think a lot of people are just like, don't want to think about the huge mess up that they had yesterday.
Yeah.
They went like, okay, it's done. And they don't do that part of getting curious and looking back at it and figuring out moving forward. They're just like, no, forget it. I'll start over and move forward. So I think that's a really important first step.
Yeah. And I think that, you're right, because there's so much shame. There's so much, it's my self-worth. There's something wrong with me. Why can't I get a handle on this? So the key with this is to take that awareness with curiosity and compassion, no judgment, and say, you know what? It's just my brain doing what my brain does. And that's what I work with my clients on, because it's very hard to do this without judgment and without that shame. But really, you have to drop into that kind, self-compassionate space. Then the next step with awareness is to catch yourself during and when you have that urge, and to stop and pause. And even if you just pause for a few minutes and say, I'm noticing I have an urge, and I'm just going to pause for a few minutes to stop, to break that automatic cycle. Yeah. So there are some strategies there. And the third piece of awareness is then before you notice that you have patterns and habits. So for example, I know tonight at 11 o'clock when I'm watching TV, I always want to binge. Let me plan out now some things that I can do. Maybe I'm going to, text a friend. Maybe I'm going to just listen to a really good song. And sometimes what that does is it just helps the urge to subside a little. And then what I tell my clients is even after you do that, if you still decide to binge in the beginning, that's okay. The whole idea is to stop and to slow down and to start to change that neural pathway in your brain to recognize that, hey, I'll be okay. I can start to do something different.
Yeah, I think that's a really huge point, because I think a lot of times when people are struggling with changing habits, whatever they are, that they make it this all or nothing thing, right? Like either you quit it cold turkey or you screw it up and forget it. And to be able to hold that place where, you still may be doing the behavior, but you're starting to change your awareness in the moment or before the moment, and to not beat yourself up about that anyway. Like, that's a revolutionary thought. And I really appreciate what you're saying here, because I think these are techniques that we don't really see talked about publicly. Like, I have the idea, and I don't really know because I haven't been on the inside, but I kind of have the idea that these are more like the things they talk about when people are in the addiction programs or in the facilities, with deep counseling. But these aren't the kinds of things that we just talk about when we read self-help books or when we hear most self-help talking about how to break habits or change habits. I think this is super important.
Yeah. So the next step, that planning ahead leads into my step 2, which is to plan and to take small steps. So the idea here is to decide, what is it I really want? What is that compelling reason? Like, why do I really want to stop binging or overeating? And you establish a goal, you establish a result. And then the idea is that you decide on one thing I can do tomorrow, and you take it a step at a time, and you make it manageable, you make it realistic so that you can achieve that step. So the idea is you plan, you make it realistic, but a little bit of a stretch. So that way you can start to build the confidence in yourself, and you can start to see some change. And I really see it as one decision at a time, one step at a time. And
Right.
then you start to build that momentum.
Yep. That's encouraging.
Yeah. The third step is to stop restricting. And I mean both physical and mental. So
Okay, tell us what you mean about that. Yeah. What do you
yeah.
mean?
Yeah. So physical is oftentimes, when I mention that binge restrict cycle, okay, you binged yesterday, you overate, you feel so guilty, and you're like, okay, I'm going to be good all day. You know what? And no matter how hungry I am, I'm not going to eat, or I'm going to eat very little, right? I'm just going to eat this and this and this. But what happens is, by the end of the day, your body goes into starvation mode and your brain is on overdrive, and your urge is so strong that you just can't stand it. And you're going to want to overeat. You're going to want to binge. And your emotional state, you can't control it. You're not at a level calm place.
It's kinda hangry.
It's hangry. That's it. So, but the other piece is mental restriction, because sometimes we're eating something, but we tell ourselves, I shouldn't be eating this. I'm bad. This is bad food. This is not something I should be having. And
Okay.
that also plays into it. So there's both the physical and the mental restriction that then leads into you tending to have a stronger urge.
Wow.
Which then leads into a binge. Yeah.
Wow.
So
I never thought of it like that. Okay.
yeah. And that's where, when I mentioned the intuitive eating, part of this too is, like with the physical restriction, is let's be in tune with your body. And what does my body need right now? And it not necessarily, even when you're ready to have that urge to binge, you could even be asking yourself, does my body really need a quart of ice cream right now? What does my body need? I mean, you could really, it's kind of silly, but,
Yeah.
but also throughout the day, you're starving. You know what? Let's honor the hunger. What
does my body really need right now? I love that. And that should be a tweet or Insta post. What does my body need right now? Because I think we don't think about it in those terms. We think about it in terms of want or desire or hunger, less than, okay, what does my body really need at this moment? Let me take care of it.
Yeah. A lot of that hunger, oftentimes, sometimes it's physical hunger, but a lot of times it's emotional hunger and desire. It's like what my brain wants, what I think I want, So
Yeah.
but I think with intuitive eating, it's a combination, because you want to eat, but you also want to be satisfied. So it's not just the quantity of food, but it's what you're eating: protein, fat, carbohydrate, something that you enjoy. So step 4, and I actually think this is the hardest part, is to allow the urges when they're there.
I do think this is the hardest thing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's such a tricky thing to learn. And we've talked about it before on the podcast about the difference between resisting or running from or allowing urges. And everybody has their own little way about figuring out. It's kind of like when she learned to ride the unicycle, you could do it, but it's hard to teach. So how do you teach allowing urges?
Yeah. So what I work with my clients on really is let's just practice. Let's practice. Okay. Let's take yourself to that moment where you had the urge. And one tactic is close your eyes, and just let's think about where is that urge in your body? What does it feel like? Let's slow down, breathe, point to it, and you start to describe it with physical sensation words like, is it fast or is it slow? Is it vibrating? Does it have a color? Stuff like that. To start to really understand that it's just a sensation in your body. And that over time, what that does is not necessarily does the urge go away. Sometimes it does, but it definitely helps yourself to separate from it and recognize the urge or that strong emotion. It's not me. It's just something that's happening inside of me, which means
I like that.
Yeah, which means I can get it out of me if I really want. Choice is mine.
Right.
Yeah. I almost say, like, when you have a feeling or an urge inside of you, it's almost as if I have desire in me. Not I'm feeling desire, but I have desire in me. If you phrase it that way, it's like a trick. That means I can get it out of me. Right?
Yeah, I like that.
So,
it's a detachment.
Yeah, that's one of the things, one of the strategies.
I have desire in me. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you
Cool.
wouldn't walk around saying it like that, but to think about it that way, it helps
That
you
can be
detach.
really helpful.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And then to think about, the long-term or the short-term pleasure. So right now I'm in pain. And in order to get rid of the pain, I want to binge, right? But then if I binge now, afterwards, down the road, 30 minutes from now, an hour from now, tomorrow morning, I'm going to feel that pain come back. And it's going to be worse because I'm going to have pain and I'm also going to have shame. So reminding yourself of that. Do I want to deal with pain now? Because it is kind of painful now, and just be able to open up to it and breathe into it and allow it. And then the reward on the back end is going to be so fabulous.
So it's going to hurt either way. You can have pain now going through allowing the urge, or you're going to have pain later when you allow the urge and then you feel like crap afterwards the next day, right? So then it's a matter of, do you want to feel pride that you followed through with what you wanted to do, or do you want to feel pain and pride or pain and shame, right?
That's it. And that goes back to like that step 2 with what is your compelling reason and why do you really want this? And that reason needs to be compelling enough. You go back to that when you feel that urge. Oh, that's right. I really want this because, you know what? I want to be healthy. I'm concerned about my health. I don't know what the reason is. I can't think off the top of my head, but you come up with some reason that you can go back to, that you can remind yourself this is why it's important to me.
Like an anchor.
Yeah.
Cool.
And step 5 is really dealing with the model that I know you teach. It's managing your mind, and it's mind management. And it's that, I call it like the think, feel, do cycle.
Yep.
Right? And that's what the coaching is all about, because you go through this and okay, you can say, here's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Great. Sounds nice. Makes total sense logically. But once you're doing it, it's hard. And what the problem is, the thoughts are going to come up and the beliefs are going to come up and the emotions are going to come up. And you're going to be like, I know I said that, but no.
But forget it.
I don't think so.
Not tonight, brain.
So. Exactly. So that's why go ahead.
How do you teach your clients to manage the mind then? Do you have them actually do a model when they have a binge cycle, or how do you put it into your work?
Yeah, so I do work with them on models in my sessions, and then I do suggest that they do thought downloads and that they start with recognizing their thoughts and becoming aware of them, becoming aware of their emotions, their feelings, becoming aware of, before they eat, their hunger, their fullness, and what's going on in their mind during those moments. what are their thoughts before they're eating or before they're wanting to binge. So I work the thought work in, I use the model, but I also work in the thoughts in a variety of ways. And there's another tactic. This is very specifically from the Carolyn Costin Institute. It's called the healthy self versus the eating disorder self dialogue. So there's always two thoughts in your brain.
Right.
There tends to be. There's one that's like the angel and the devil.
Right.
Right. There's one, oh yeah, you know what? I screwed it up already. I might as well keep eating. Tomorrow I'm going to be good again. So I might as well just keep eating, keep going, or I'm not worth it. Something's wrong with me. That's like what I call the eating disorder thought or the binge thought. And then there's the healthy thought, the healthy self. But that's the part that wants you to be better. But wait a minute. Remember, I don't want to do this. Binging is not something I really want to do. I might think it's going to make me feel good right now, but then I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and I'm going to feel awful. So no, I don't really want to do this. So it's recognizing those two voices. And you have a choice in every moment. Which do I want to listen to? I almost think it's like, think of one on one hand and one on the other.
Yeah.
And you can see
look back and forth.
back and forth. Who do I want to pay attention to today in this moment? That's a choice I always have.
Yep.
So,
that's great. Yeah. We always have that choice, don't we? Even when it seems like it's running out of control on its own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, cool. So bottom line here, tell me, Lisa, what's the bottom line?
Yeah. So the bottom line really is, it is about the food, but it also isn't about the food. So what I mean by that is, it is about the food because you have to change your behaviors with food in order to change. If you keep doing the same thing, you're not going to change, right?
Right.
But it isn't about the food because such a big piece of it is your mind and your emotions. And I honestly believe that 80% of it is the mind and emotion, and 20% of it is the food. The food is almost like it's like the surface level issue. And as Janine Roth says, it's the doorway in. And let's even thank it. Let's thank it because it's showing us where there's something going on that we need to pay attention to when we're using food in a way that's destructive to our bodies.
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. I think you brought some practical steps that you were going to share. I know we sprinkled some in our conversation. You have some do action items the next time that our listeners have an urge to binge or overeat.
Yeah. And I wanted to break this out because I feel like I gave a lot of information sort of top line. And what do I do? What do I do with all this, Lisa? Right. So I would say the first thing I tell my clients to do, and I suggest this to all the listeners, is the next time you have an urge to binge or to overeat is really just pause for 5 minutes. Right. And that doesn't mean you can't then binge and overeat, but just pause for 5 minutes and ask yourself, I have a few questions. One is, am I hungry? Okay. Am I physically hungry?
Mm-hmm.
And if you are, then allow yourself to eat. And by the way, if you do so, taste the food, please.
At least enjoy it.
Enjoy it. Okay.
I am the worst about eating in my car and just getting it in my body and not even stopping to enjoy it, right? At least sit down, get a napkin.
Exactly. You know what? I'm deserving to enjoy this, right? Right?
Yeah.
So, okay, let's just assume you're not, because most of this is about really not being physically hungry. I have 3 key questions that you can ask yourself. One is, why do I want this?
Okay. Why do I want this?
Yeah. The second is, why don't I want this?
Why don't I? That's a better question. Why don't I want this?
And the third is, which do I want more?
That's your little devil angel thing. That's awesome.
But it helps. It helps to break it. And you can look at it and just be kind with yourself. Because here's where you can get very judgmental and go back and be like, I shouldn't be thinking this way, right? There's something wrong with me. This is awful. Why can everyone else do this and not me, So, yeah, be very kind and compassionate.
That is such a beautiful way of presenting this topic. Lisa, you've just done a beautiful job. Thank you so much for coming and sharing this with our listeners and with me today. Can you share just at the end here where they can find you, other than, of course, you're one of you're one of our amazing Virtuosa coaching coaches, but where else can they find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah. So I believe you're going to put this in the show notes, but I have my email, lisabthelifecoach@gmail.com. But the other thing is I have a Facebook business page where I post blogs and tips.
Okay.
And that's called Lisa Becker, Certified Eating Disorder and Life Coach.
Okay. We'll make sure we put that on there too. That'll be awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming and chatting with us today. Really fun.
Thank you, Sue, for having me. I enjoyed this.
Bye. Me too.
Bye.
Bye. All right. So what we've shown you today, 5 very practical, very actionable steps to getting a handle on your thoughts and stopping out of control binging behaviors in your life. And it starts with having compassion on yourself. Where to find Lisa? You can find her on Facebook at Lisa B Coaching. To learn more about eating disorder coaching, check out the Carolyn Costin Institute at carolyn-costin.com/institute. We'll put these links in the show notes. And to contact Lisa, you can find her at virtuosacoaching.com or email her at lisabthelifecoach@gmail.com. All right, here's my favorite part of the podcast, what we're listening to and reading and watching sometimes. So today, Lisa is reading a book by Marie Forleo. It's called Everything is Figure-Outable. It's so encouraging, right? Everything is figure-outable. So check that out. You can find it on Amazon. Links in the show notes below. What she's listening to is a song called Me by Paula Cole. And it's very much an empowerment song. Check it out. What I'm actually watching Super Soul Sundays with Oprah. I really enjoy most of the interviews that she has. She did one recently with Lynn Twist. Lynn is the author of a book called The Soul of Money, and she talks about what I'm going to talk about in my next podcast, which brings me to next week. Next week, we're not going to have an interview. We're going to skip the interviews for a week, and I'm going to do a teaching podcast called Life is Not a Pie. We're going to be teaching about scarcity mindset versus sufficiency mindset, and that is the heart of the book called The Soul of Money. So I am looking forward to doing that teaching with y'all next week. Please tune in, and if you have any friends that you know are struggling with scarcity mindset or struggling with their relationship with money and themselves and where that falls in the world, you will really want to check that out. So, okay, my virtuosos, have a wonderful week. Love always, Sue. I will see you next week in episode 33.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Becoming Virtuosa. If you want to find out more, come check out virtuosacoaching.com. That's virtuosa with an A, coaching.com. See you next week.